The morning sun cast long shadows across the launch platform as Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted the collar of her formal diplomatic uniform. The fabric felt strange against her skin, woven with threads that would withstand the vacuum of space and the unknown atmospheres of alien worlds. She had trained for this moment for 7 years, studying every known alien language, memorizing diplomatic protocols that had taken decades to establish, and preparing for humanity's greatest moment. First contact. The sleek vessel behind her hummed with barely contained energy, its hull gleaming with the same advanced materials that had allowed humanity to finally break free from their solar system. The breakthrough in faster-than-light travel had come just 18 months ago, and already the United Earth government had detected 17 different alien civilizations within 100 light years. Today, Sarah would represent not just Earth, but the hopes and dreams of 8 billion humans who had spent their entire existence wondering if they were alone in the universe. Director Marcus Webb approached, his weathered face showing the strain of months of preparation. As head of the diplomatic corps, he had personally selected Sarah for this mission, choosing her not just for her linguistic abilities and cultural knowledge, but for her unique combination of strength and compassion. She could speak 12 Earth languages fluently, had degrees in both anthropology and xenobiology, and most importantly, she possessed the rare ability to find common ground between vastly different cultures. The Council's response came through this morning, Webb said, handing her a datapad. They've agreed to receive you at their primary station in the Kepler 442 system. The journey will take 43 hours with our current drive technology. Sarah scanned the formal invitation, noting the elaborate ceremonial language that reminded her of ancient Earth diplomatic traditions. The Galactic Council claimed to represent 47 different species across known space, maintaining peace and order through what they called harmonious cooperation. Their message spoke of welcoming humanity into the galactic community, of sharing knowledge and resources, of the bright future that awaited species who embraced their guidance. Any word on what to expect? Sarah asked, studying the complex geometric patterns that served as the Council's official seal. Webb shook his head. Our deep space monitoring arrays have picked up fragments of their communications, but their encryption is beyond anything we've encountered. What we do know is that every species that has joined the Council has prospered. Advanced technology, abundant resources, protection from hostile forces. They seem to offer everything we could want. What neither Sarah nor Webb could have known was that humanity's radio and quantum transmissions had been intercepted by Council monitoring stations for the past 60 years. Every broadcast, every digital communication, every classified military file that had ever been transmitted through space had been carefully catalogued and analyzed by the Council's vast intelligence apparatus. They knew about humanity's wars, their weapons, their capacity for both creation and destruction. More importantly, they knew exactly how to exploit human psychology. The Council had perfected their approach over 3 millennia. Initial contact was always conducted with careful ceremony and overwhelming displays of technological superiority. New species were invited to their primary station, a massive artificial construct that housed over 50 million beings from across the galaxy. The scale alone was enough to humble most civilizations, making them grateful to accept whatever terms the Council offered. What visiting species didn't realize until too late was that the Council's definition of harmonious cooperation involved complete subjugation. Every member species provided resources, technology, and population to feed the Council's vast machine. In exchange, they received protection from threats that the Council itself had often created, and just enough technology to keep their populations compliant. The few species that had attempted to resist had been made into examples. Their homeworlds had been reduced to asteroid fields, their populations scattered or enslaved, their very names erased from galactic records. The Council maintained detailed files on these object lessons, sharing them with new species who showed signs of independence. As Sarah's ship engaged its faster-than-light drive and disappeared into the void between stars, Council Overseer Theron reviewed humanity's complete file. The species showed promising signs of technological advancement and industrial capacity, but their history of warfare concerned him. Humans seemed incapable of living in peace even among their own kind, having fought countless wars over resources, ideology, and simple territorial disputes. Still, their capacity for violence could be useful if properly directed. The Council always needed fresh soldiers for their expansion campaigns, and humans showed remarkable adaptability in combat situations. Their psychological profiles suggested they could be easily manipulated through appeals to their protective instincts and their desire for security. Theron made his decision. Humanity would be offered the standard package, limited membership in the Council, in exchange for military service and resource extraction rights to their solar system. If they accepted, they would be gradually integrated into the Council's hierarchy over the next century. If they refused, well, Earth's location made it an excellent forward base for Council operations in that sector of the galaxy. Sarah spent the 43-hour journey reviewing everything humanity knew about galactic civilization. The ship's AI had compiled thousands of hours of intercepted communications, providing her with basic understanding of the major species and their cultures. The Zelthans were master engineers who had built most of the Council's infrastructure. The Cathara were explorers who mapped new regions of space. The Mordesh served as the Council's military arm, their warrior culture perfectly suited to maintaining order across dozens of star systems. What struck Sarah most was how efficiently the Council seemed to operate. Each species contributed their strengths to the greater whole, creating a civilization that spanned a significant portion of the galaxy. It was exactly the kind of cooperation that humanity had struggled to achieve even on their single world. The Council station appeared on her ship's sensors 12 hours before arrival, and Sarah spent those final hours staring at the massive structure in amazement. The station was larger than Earth's moon, its crystalline spires reaching out in all directions like the branches of some impossible tree. Millions of ships moved around it in carefully orchestrated patterns, carrying goods and passengers between the station and the rest of the galaxy. As her ship was guided into one of the thousands of docking bays, Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She was about to become the first human to set foot on an alien world, the first to speak directly with representatives of galactic civilization. Whatever happened in the next few days would determine humanity's future among the stars. The docking bay was filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size. Sarah saw creatures that looked like living crystals, others that seemed to be made of liquid metal, and still others that defied any earthly comparison. Her translator implant, a piece of technology that had taken Earth's best scientists 5 years to develop, worked overtime to process the dozens of different languages being spoken around her. A delegation of council representatives was waiting for her, led by a tall being whose skin seemed to shift between different shades of blue, depending on the angle of the light. This was Councillor Vyax, the official liaison for new species integration. He had conducted the same meeting hundreds of times before, each one following the same carefully scripted pattern. Ambassador Chen, Vyax said, his translator rendering his words in perfect English. Welcome to the heart of galactic civilization. I am Councillor Vyax, and it is my honor to guide you through your first contact with the Council. Sarah bowed in the formal manner she had practiced, showing respect without subservience. Councillor Vyax, I bring greetings from Earth and the United Earth Government. We are honored by this opportunity to join the galactic community. As they walked through the station's vast corridors, Vyax provided a carefully crafted tour designed to impress and overwhelm. They visited the Grand Library, which contained the accumulated knowledge of 47 civilizations. They observed the Central Assembly, where representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss policy. They toured the technological centers where alien scientists worked on projects that would have seemed like magic to most humans. Throughout the tour, Vyax carefully planted seeds of dependence. He mentioned the hostile forces that prowled the edges of known space, the rogue civilizations that had rejected the Council's guidance and now survived by raiding peaceful worlds. He spoke of the complex web of trade and diplomacy that kept the galaxy stable, and how difficult it would be for any single species to navigate these waters alone. Humanity shows great promise, Vyax said as they stood on an observation deck overlooking the station's central core. Your species has the technical skill and cultural diversity that the Council values. With our guidance, Earth could become a significant contributor to galactic civilization. Sarah noticed the careful phrasing, the way Vyax spoke of guidance rather than partnership, but she attributed it to translation difficulties. Her mission was to establish peaceful relations and gather intelligence about galactic civilization, not to negotiate specific terms. Those discussions would come later, once humanity had a better understanding of what they were dealing with. What Sarah couldn't know was that every word of their conversation was being analyzed by the Council's psychological assessment teams. Her responses, her body language, even her biometric readings were being compared against profiles of thousands of other species' first ambassadors. The Council was learning exactly how to manipulate humanity's decision-makers, what fears to exploit and what desires to promise. The formal audience with the Council was scheduled for the next day, giving Sarah time to rest and prepare her presentation. She had brought with her a carefully crafted overview of human civilization, highlighting their achievements in art, science, and technology, while downplaying their more violent tendencies. The goal was to present humanity as a species ready to contribute to galactic civilization. That evening, as Sarah reviewed her notes in the luxurious quarters provided by the Council, she felt optimistic about humanity's future. The galactic community seemed everything Earth had hoped for: peaceful, prosperous, and welcoming to new members. She began drafting her preliminary report to Earth, recommending that the government prepare for formal membership negotiations. She had no way of knowing that in another part of the station, Councillor Vyax was meeting with Overseer Theron to finalize their strategy for humanity's integration. The psychological profile was complete, the manipulation tactics had been chosen, and the terms of humanity's subjugation were being drafted. The Council had decided that humanity would serve as their military arm in the local sector, providing soldiers and ships for the expansion into unclaimed territory. Earth would become a resource extraction center, its population gradually relocated to serve Council interests across the galaxy. It was the same fate that had befallen 46 other species, and humanity would accept it just as the others had. After all, what choice would they have once they understood the true scope of the Council's power? The next morning, Sarah was escorted to the Grand Assembly Chamber for her formal address to the Council. The chamber was a vast amphitheater carved from a single piece of black crystal, with seating for representatives from every member species. As Sarah took her place at the central podium, she was surrounded by beings whose combined knowledge and experience spanned millennia. Overseer Theron, a massive creature whose species had been among the Council's founding members, presided over the assembly from an elevated platform. His voice, when he spoke, seemed to resonate from the very walls of the chamber. "We gather today to welcome a new species to our community," Theron announced. "Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth will present her people's case for membership in the Galactic Council." Sarah stepped forward, her presentation carefully organized to demonstrate humanity's worthiness for membership. She spoke of Earth's scientific achievements, their artistic accomplishments, their potential contributions to galactic civilization. She mentioned their recent breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel, their expertise in planetary engineering, their diverse cultures and perspectives. The Council listened politely, asking occasional questions that seemed designed more to assess humanity's technological capabilities than to understand their culture. Sarah answered each query with growing confidence, believing she was successfully advocating for her species. When her presentation concluded, Overseer Theron nodded approvingly. "The Council has reviewed humanity's profile extensively, Ambassador Chen. We are prepared to offer your species membership in our organization." Sarah felt a surge of excitement. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of since they first looked up at the stars. But as Theron continued, her enthusiasm began to curdle into horror. "Humanity will provide military personnel for Council operations in Sectors 7 through 12, Theron announced. "Earth's industrial capacity will be integrated into the Council's resource network, with production quotas to be determined by our economic division. Your population centers will be relocated as needed to serve Council interests, and your government will operate under Council oversight to ensure proper compliance." The terms weren't an invitation to join galactic civilization, they were terms of surrender. Sarah tried to maintain her diplomatic composure, but her voice shook as she responded. "Overseer Theron, I believe there may be some misunderstanding. Humanity seeks partnership in the galactic community, not subjugation." A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembly. Theron's expression didn't change as he replied, "There is no misunderstanding, Ambassador. Every species that joins the Council does so under the same terms. Order and prosperity require hierarchy and discipline. Humanity will contribute to the greater good, just as every member species does." "And if we refuse these terms?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Theron gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the space around the station. Thousands of warships floated in perfect formation, their weapons trained on Sarah's small diplomatic vessel. Each ship was larger than anything in Earth's tiny fleet, armed with weapons that could reduce planets to cosmic dust. "Refusal is not recommended," Theron said simply. "Your species shows promise, but the galaxy has no place for those who cannot accept the wisdom of cooperation. We have dealt with rebellious species before, and their fate serves as a lesson to others." Sarah realized with growing horror that this had all been a trap. Humanity's first contact wasn't with a benevolent galactic community, but with an empire that had conquered 46 other species and was now preparing to add Earth to their collection. Every species that had come before her had faced this same choice: submit or be destroyed. I need to consult with my government, Sarah said, desperately trying to buy time. That will not be necessary, Theron replied. You have the authority to speak for your species. According to your own credentials, you will accept our terms now, or we will interpret your refusal as an act of hostility against the Council. The trap was closing around her, and Sarah understood with crystal clarity that she was facing a decision that would determine the fate of 8 billion people. The Council had orchestrated this entire encounter using humanity's own desire for peaceful contact against them. They had studied human psychology, learned exactly how to exploit human weaknesses, and now they were demanding Earth's surrender, disguised as an invitation to join their community. But Sarah Chen had not been chosen for this mission because she was easily intimidated. She had been chosen because she possessed the kind of moral courage that refused to bow to tyrants, no matter how powerful they might be. She thought of her children back on Earth, of the billions of people who were counting on her to secure their future among the stars, and she made the only choice she could live with. The United Earth government rejects your terms, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Humanity will not submit to slavery, no matter what threats you make. We came to the stars seeking friends and found only bullies. But humanity has dealt with bullies before. The silence that followed her words was absolute. For 3,000 years, no species had dared to refuse the Council's offer. The concept was so alien that many of the representatives couldn't process what they had just heard. Theron's expression finally changed, his features hardening with anger. You speak of courage, Ambassador, but you have doomed your species to destruction. No one refuses the Council and survives. Then you don't know humanity very well, Sarah replied, her diplomatic training finally giving way to the steel that had made her species masters of their own world. We'd rather die free than live as slaves. Theron made a gesture, and Sarah felt energy weapons targeting her from a dozen different directions. She knew she would not leave this chamber alive, but she also knew that her death would carry a message back to Earth. The galaxy was not the peaceful community they had hoped for, but humanity had faced extinction before and survived. Execute her, Theron commanded, and prepare the fleet for immediate departure to Earth. This species will serve as an example to any others who might consider resistance. As the energy beams converged on her position, Sarah Chen's last thought was a prayer that humanity would remember her sacrifice and prepare for the war that was coming. She had bought Earth perhaps a few weeks of preparation time with her life, and she hoped it would be enough. But what neither Sarah nor the Council could have known was that Earth had been preparing for this possibility from the moment they achieved faster-than-light travel. Hidden deep beneath the planet's surface in facilities that existed in no official records, humanity's greatest military minds had been developing weapons designed for one specific purpose: ensuring that anyone who threatened Earth would regret it for the brief remainder of their existence. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening humanity's home. The news of Ambassador Chen's execution reached Earth exactly 72 hours after her death, transmitted through a quantum relay beacon hidden in her diplomatic vessel.
Director Webb stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the real-time positions of every known Council ship.
The images coming through the relay were grainy but clear enough to confirm their worst fears. Sarah had been killed in front of the entire Galactic Council, and a massive alien fleet was now heading directly toward Earth. General Alexandra Voss stepped forward, her weathered face grim with determination. As head of the Solar Defense Initiative, she had spent the last decade preparing for exactly this scenario. While the public believed Earth's military consisted of patrol ships and orbital defense platforms, the truth was far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. How long do we have? Webb asked, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. Their fleet is maintaining standard approach velocity, Voss replied, studying the tactical display. Based on our observations of their drive technology, approximately 18 days before they reach the outer solar system, 3 more days to reach Earth orbit. Webb nodded, his mind already moving through the decision tree he had hoped never to use. Initiate Prometheus Protocol. Full authorization, all black sites, complete weapon release. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Prometheus Protocol was humanity's darkest secret, a project so classified that fewer than 50 people in the entire world knew it existed. It had been developed in the years following humanity's first detection of alien signals, when it became clear that any species capable of interstellar communication was likely far more advanced than Earth. The protocol was based on a simple principle. If humanity ever faced extinction at the hands of an alien civilization, they would ensure that the cost of destroying Earth was so high that no other species would ever consider threatening humanity again. Voss placed her palm on the biometric scanner, authorizing the activation of weapons that had never been tested at full capacity. Around the globe, hidden installations began powering up systems that drew energy directly from the planet's core. In facilities buried beneath mountains and ocean floors, technologies that pushed the boundaries of known physics came online for the first time. The first component of Prometheus Protocol was Project Damocles, a network of gravitational manipulation devices positioned at key points throughout the solar system. For 8 years, teams of physicists and engineers had worked to develop technology that could create localized gravitational anomalies powerful enough to tear apart enemy ships. The devices had been disguised as asteroid mining operations and deep space research stations, hiding in plain sight while they waited for activation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's lead scientist, monitored the startup sequence from her control center on Luna. The gravitational generators were coming online ahead of schedule, their exotic matter cores already beginning to warp space-time around their positions. Each generator could create a gravitational field equivalent to a neutron star, condensed into a space no larger than a basketball court. Damocles' grid is operational, she reported to Earth. All 27 nodes responding within acceptable parameters. We can create kill zones anywhere in the solar system with 30 seconds notice. But gravitational weapons were only the beginning. Deeper in Earth's crust, in facilities that required clearance from 3 different agencies just to acknowledge their existence, Project Thanatos was awakening. The research had begun with humanity's first successful fusion experiments, but it quickly moved far beyond anything civilian scientists could imagine. Colonel Marcus Reed stood in the primary control chamber of Thanatos Station, watching as his technicians brought online weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The breakthrough had come from studying the quantum foam that underlay reality itself, learning to manipulate the virtual particles that constantly appeared and disappeared at the subatomic level. The result was a class of weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but temporarily unraveled the quantum fields that held atoms together. A single Thanatos device could reduce a city-sized target to its component subatomic particles in less than a microsecond. The energy release was so intense that it created temporary tears in space-time itself. "Thanatos array is charging," Reed reported. Estimated time to full capacity, 14 hours. We'll have enough energy for 12 maximum yield discharges. The third component was perhaps the most disturbing. Project Erebos had been developed by psychologists and xenobiologists working in complete isolation from the rest of humanity's scientific community. Their mission was to create weapons that attacked not physical matter, but consciousness itself. Dr. Sarah Kim reviewed the activation protocols with growing unease. She had helped design these weapons, but she had never expected they would actually be used. Erebus devices generated quantum entanglement patterns that interfered with the electrical activity of neural tissue. Any intelligent being exposed to the field would experience complete sensory dissolution, followed by permanent psychological collapse. "Erebus nodes are deploying," she reported, her voice barely steady. "Full coverage of Earth-lunar space will be achieved in 6 hours. Any alien boarding parties will face immediate neural disruption." But the most terrifying aspect of Prometheus Protocol wasn't any single weapon system. It was the fact that every device had been designed with a failsafe that would ensure they activated automatically if Earth's population dropped below sustainable levels. If the Council succeeded in conquering humanity, they would inherit a planet rigged to destroy anyone who tried to live on it. As the various weapon systems came online, Admiral Chen Zhao prepared the final component of Earth's defense. The Solar Defense Fleet consisted of ships that had been built in secret over the past 5 years, using technology reverse-engineered from captured alien probes and enhanced with human innovations that no other species had ever considered. The flagship, UES Retribution, was a kilometer-long monster armed with weapons that combined human engineering with alien technology in ways that defied conventional physics. Its primary weapon was a quantum cascade cannon that could chain nuclear explosions across interstellar distances, turning enemy formations into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. "All fleet elements report ready for deployment," Admiral Zhao reported. 43 vessels, all equipped with quantum armor and cascade weapons. "We may be outnumbered, but we won't go down easily." While Earth's hidden defenses activated, intelligence analysts worked frantically to understand exactly what humanity was facing. The Council fleet consisted of over 1,500 ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in Earth's conventional military. But the analysts had identified several potential weaknesses in the alien formation. Major Lisa Park studied the tactical data streaming in from hidden observation posts throughout the solar system. "Their ships are built for intimidation rather than actual combat," she reported. "Massive energy signatures, but most of that power is devoted to propulsion and life support. Their weapon systems are designed to overwhelm primitive defenses, not to fight against opponents who can strike back. The Council had grown complacent after 3,000 years of easy victories. Every species they had encountered had surrendered rather than face annihilation, and their military doctrine reflected this reality. They had overwhelming superiority in numbers and technology, but they had never faced an enemy that was willing to use weapons of mass destruction without hesitation. More importantly, they had never faced an enemy that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting wars of extinction against its own species. Humans had developed their technology in an environment where any conflict could lead to total annihilation, forcing them to create weapons that prioritized maximum destructive capacity over efficiency or elegance. As the Council fleet approached the outer solar system, Overseer Theron reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity with growing confidence. Earth's population was concentrated in vulnerable urban centers. Their military was primitive by galactic standards, and their psychology suggested they would surrender rather than face genocide. The plan was simple: demonstrate overwhelming force, demand immediate surrender, and begin the process of integrating humanity into the Council's hierarchy. If the humans showed signs of resistance, a few targeted orbital bombardments would convince them to see reason. Within a year, Earth would be producing ships and soldiers for the Council's continued expansion. Theron had personally overseen the conquest of 12 different species, and the pattern was always the same. Initial defiance gave way to pragmatic acceptance once the aliens realized the futility of resistance. Humanity might be more violent than most species, but they were also more intelligent, which meant they would recognize reality when it was demonstrated to them. The Council fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their sensors immediately detecting the primitive orbital installations around Earth and its moon. Long-range scans showed a few dozen ships of obviously inferior design, scattered throughout the inner system in what appeared to be a pathetic attempt at defense. "Begin standard intimidation protocols," Theron commanded. "Target their military installations and population centers. Once they see our capability, they'll surrender within hours." But as the Council ships moved into the solar system, their sensors began detecting anomalies, energy readings that didn't match any known technology, gravitational distortions that seemed to appear and disappear without cause, quantum signatures that suggested the presence of exotic matter in impossible quantities. On Earth, Director Webb watched the alien fleet advance toward their homeworld with grim satisfaction. Every step they took brought them deeper into the carefully prepared kill zone. Humanity had learned hard lessons from their own history about the importance of preparation, and they had spent 8 years turning their solar system into the most lethal trap ever devised. "All stations report ready," General Voss announced. "Awaiting your orders, Director." Webb thought about Ambassador Chen, about her courage in the face of certain death, about the message she had died to deliver. The Council had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had confused restraint for weakness. Humans had developed weapons of unimaginable destruction not because they enjoyed violence, but because they understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to make war so costly that no one would dare start it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb said, his voice carrying to every hidden installation in the solar system, "today we teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. Today we show them what happens when someone threatens our home." The Council fleet had reached the asteroid belt, their formation spreading out to demonstrate their overwhelming numbers. Theron was preparing to transmit his surrender demand when the first gravitational anomaly appeared. It started as a barely perceptible distortion in space, a slight bending of light that their sensors initially dismissed as instrument error. But within seconds, the distortion expanded into a gravitational field so intense that it began tearing apart the nearest Council ships at the molecular level. Admiral Kath, commander of the Council's forward elements, watched in horror as 3 of his dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist. Their matter compressed into a point of infinite density before exploding outward in a burst of exotic radiation. The gravitational field collapsed as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving nothing but an expanding cloud of subatomic particles where his ships had been. "What in the depths was that?" Kath demanded. But his science officers had no answers. The gravitational field had appeared from nothing, existed for exactly 4 seconds, and then vanished without leaving any detectable source. It was as if space itself had decided to eliminate his ships. Theron's confidence began to waver as reports flooded in from across the fleet. Similar gravitational anomalies were appearing throughout the solar system, each one lasting just long enough to destroy whatever Council ships happened to be nearby. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were manipulating the fundamental forces of reality as weapons. All ships, emergency evasive maneuvers. Theron commanded. Advance elements, fall back to safe distance. But there was no safe distance. But there, the gravitational generators had been positioned throughout the solar system specifically to ensure that no point in space was beyond their reach. As the Council fleet tried to retreat, more anomalies appeared, each one precisely targeted to maximize destruction. Dr. Vasquez monitored the battle from her lunar control center, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she directed the Damocles network. Each gravitational pulse required precise calculation to avoid affecting Earth's orbital mechanics, but the results were devastatingly effective. Grid performance exceeding expectations, she reported. Estimated enemy losses, 37% and climbing. They're trying to retreat, but we can reach them anywhere in the system. On Earth, the Thanatos array had finished charging, its quantum disruptors ready to unleash forces that would make the gravitational weapons look subtle. Colonel Reed watched the tactical display as enemy ships tried to find formation outside the range of the gravitational generators, unaware that they were positioning themselves perfectly for the next phase of humanity's defense. Thanatos array locked on primary targets, Reed reported. Preparing to fire on your command. The Council fleet had regrouped beyond the orbit of Jupiter, far enough from the gravitational anomalies to maintain formation, but close enough to continue their advance on Earth. Theron stared at the tactical displays showing the destruction of nearly 600 ships, losses that exceeded any single battle in Council history. These humans weren't just resisting, they were winning. Their weapons technology was unlike anything the Council had encountered, manipulating physical forces in ways that should have been impossible for a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Begin long-range bombardment, Theron commanded. Target their population centers from maximum range. If we can't conquer them, we'll exterminate them. The Council ships opened fire, sending streams of plasma and exotic energy toward Earth from across the solar system. The attack would take several minutes to reach its targets, but when it arrived, it would reduce Earth's surface to molten slag. But the bombardment never reached its destination. As the energy beams crossed the inner solar system, they encountered the Erebus field, a quantum interference pattern that disrupted the coherence of any directed energy weapon. The plasma streams dispersed harmlessly into space, their energy absorbed by the quantum foam itself. Impossible, Admiral Keth breathed, watching his weapons simply disappear before reaching their targets. They're manipulating quantum mechanics as a defensive measure. Theron realized with growing horror that humanity possessed defensive technology that could neutralize the Council's primary weapons, combined with offensive capabilities that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics. This wasn't a conquest anymore, it was a nightmare scenario that no Council strategist had ever imagined. All ships, prepare for immediate retreat to faster-than-light velocity, Theron commanded. We need to regroup and assess these new weapons. But as the Council fleet began charging their faster-than-light drives, Colonel Reed received the authorization he had been waiting for. The Thanatos array, powered by energy drawn from Earth's molten core, prepared to demonstrate why humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thanatos array firing, Reed announced, his voice calm despite the magnitude of destruction he was about to unleash. The quantum disruptors fired in perfect synchronization, their beams invisible but carrying enough concentrated energy to temporarily tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself. They reached the Council fleet in microseconds, and where they touched enemy ships, matter simply ceased to exist. Unlike the gravitational weapons, which destroyed through crushing force, the quantum disruptors attacked the fundamental bonds that held atoms together. Ships, crew, and equipment were reduced to their component subatomic particles so quickly that they didn't have time to explode. They simply vanished, leaving behind only brief flashes of exotic radiation. The destruction was absolute and instantaneous. Over 300 Council ships disappeared in the span of a single second, their crews never even realizing what had happened to them. The surviving vessels found themselves flying through clouds of free quarks and leptons, the only evidence that their comrades had ever existed. Theron stared at his tactical display in complete shock. In less than an hour, humanity had destroyed nearly 2/3 of his fleet using weapons that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. These weren't just advanced versions of familiar technology. They were entirely new categories of warfare that treated the universe itself as a weapon. The surviving Council ships finally achieved faster-than-light velocity and fled the solar system, their crews traumatized by their first encounter with an enemy that had been willing to use weapons of mass destruction without hesitation. Behind them, Earth's hidden defenses powered down to standby mode, ready to activate again if the aliens were foolish enough to return. In the Situation Room beneath Geneva, Director Webb surveyed the aftermath of humanity's first interstellar battle. They had faced an enemy with overwhelming numerical and technological superiority and emerged victorious, but the cost would be measured in more than destroyed alien ships. Status report, Webb requested. General Voss consulted her displays. All weapon systems performed within acceptable parameters. Estimated enemy losses, 837 ships destroyed. Unknown number damaged. No alien survivors detected in our solar system. Webb nodded grimly. Humanity had won this battle, but they had also announced their presence to the galaxy in the most violent way possible. The Council would not forgive this humiliation, and they would return with everything they had. The war for Earth's independence had only just begun. News of the disaster in the Sol system reached the Council's primary station within days, carried by the surviving ships of Theron's decimated fleet. The report seemed impossible at first, describing weapons that manipulated gravity and quantum mechanics with the casual ease of a species hurling rocks. But the evidence was undeniable. Nearly 900 Council vessels had been destroyed by a civilization that had achieved interstellar travel less than 2 years ago. Grand Overseer, Malfin, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Council, convened an emergency session in the deepest chambers of the Council station. As the eldest member of the founding species, Malfin had presided over 3 millennia of galactic expansion, watching as 47 different civilizations had been absorbed into the Council's empire. Never in that time had any species dared to resist, let alone defeat, a Council fleet. The chamber filled with representatives from every member species, their various forms creating a bizarre assembly of alien evolution. But despite their physical differences, they shared a common expression of shock and fear. If humans could destroy a Council fleet with such ease, what did that mean for the security they had all taken for granted? The evidence is clear, Malton announced, his ancient voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Humanity possesses weapons technology that exceeds our understanding of physics. They have not only refused our offer of membership, they have actively declared war on the Council itself. Councillor Vayax, who had personally met with Ambassador Chen, stepped forward with his report. Our intelligence analysis suggests that humanity has been preparing for this confrontation since their first detection of our communications. They deliberately concealed their military capabilities during first contact, presenting themselves as a peaceful species while secretly deploying weapons throughout their solar system. The implications were staggering. For 3,000 years, the Council had operated under the assumption that any species capable of interstellar travel would recognize the futility of resistance. Their entire diplomatic and military doctrine was based on overwhelming technological superiority combined with demonstration of force. But humanity had turned that doctrine against them, using their own confidence as a weapon. Admiral Keth, one of the few senior commanders to survive the Sol System massacre, provided the military assessment. Their weapons operate on principles we don't understand. Gravitational manipulation that appears and disappears without detectable energy sources. Quantum disruptors that tear apart matter at the subatomic level. Defensive fields that neutralize our energy weapons completely. The psychological impact was even more severe than the military losses. For millennia, Council species had accepted their subordinate status because resistance seemed impossible. But humanity had proved that the Council could be beaten, that their mighty fleets could be destroyed by a determined enemy with superior technology. Reports were already coming in from across Council space of member species questioning their loyalty, of populations demanding information about humanity's weapons, of entire worlds beginning to consider the possibility of independence. The human victory had done more than destroy ships, it had shattered the myth of Council invincibility. Malfin studied the tactical data with growing concern. The humans had demonstrated 3 distinct categories of exotic weapons, each one representing a breakthrough that should have been impossible for a species of their technological level. More importantly, they had deployed these weapons with the precision and coordination of a civilization that had been planning for interstellar warfare for decades. How many ships do we need to guarantee victory? Malfin asked his military advisors. Unknown, Admiral Keth replied. Their defensive capabilities neutralized our weapons completely, while their offensive systems destroyed our ships faster than we could target them. Traditional numerical superiority may not be sufficient. The answer was unacceptable. The Council's power rested on their ability to project overwhelming force anywhere in the galaxy. If they couldn't defeat a single human world, their entire empire would collapse as member species realized they had nothing to fear from Council retaliation. Assemble the Grand Fleet, Malfin commanded. Every available ship from every member species. If humanity wants war, They will face the combined might of galactic civilization. The order went out across Council space, calling upon the military forces of 47 different worlds. Within weeks, the largest armada in galactic history began assembling at staging points throughout the galaxy. Over 7,000 ships, representing the finest military technology the Council could deploy, prepared for the journey to Sol System. But the Council's preparations did not go unnoticed. Earth's intelligence network, hastily established in the aftermath of First Contact, detected the massive military buildup through captured alien technology and intercepted communications. The message was clear. Humanity had humiliated the galaxy's dominant power, and the response would be swift and overwhelming. Director Webb convened another emergency meeting in Geneva, this time with representatives from every Earth nation. The political landscape had changed dramatically since news of Ambassador Chen's murder and the subsequent battle. National governments that had spent decades arguing over territory and resources were now united by the simple reality of species survival. Intelligence estimates put the incoming Council force at over 7,000 ships, Webb announced. They're pulling vessels from across their empire for this assault. When they arrive, we'll be facing the combined military might of nearly 50 different civilizations. General Voss studied the projection models with professional detachment. Our current defensive systems can handle their previous numbers, but 7,000 ships represents a 10-fold increase in force. Even with our exotic weapons, the sheer volume of fire will eventually overwhelm our defenses. The mathematics were stark. Earth's hidden arsenal had been designed to defeat a single exploratory fleet, not the concentrated military power of an entire galactic empire. While their weapons were superior in quality, they were severely outnumbered in quantity. But humanity had faced extinction before, and survived through innovation and determination. If conventional defensive strategies wouldn't work, they would have to develop unconventional solutions. Initiate Project Atlas, Webb commanded. Full resources, unlimited authority, complete technological disclosure. Atlas was humanity's ultimate contingency plan. A project so ambitious that it had been considered theoretically impossible until the demonstration of alien technology. The plan involved weaponizing Earth's moon, converting Luna into a massive fortress equipped with the most destructive weapons human science could devise. Elena Vasquez found herself appointed as technical director of the largest engineering project in human history. Teams of scientists and engineers from every Earth nation were relocated to hidden facilities on Luna, where they began the seemingly impossible task of converting a natural satellite into an artificial weapon. The first phase involved hollowing out massive chambers deep within Luna's interior, creating spaces large enough to house gravitational generators the size of skyscrapers. The excavation alone required technology that had been developed in secret over the past decade, using controlled fusion charges to vaporize rock and advanced materials to line the resulting caverns. Meanwhile, the Thanatos project was being expanded beyond its original scope. Colonel Reed coordinated the installation of quantum disruptors throughout Luna's structure, creating a network of weapons that could fire in any direction, with enough combined power to sterilize entire star systems. But the most ambitious aspect of Atlas was the development of humanity's first faster-than-light weapon system. Dr. Sarah Kim, despite her moral reservations about the Erebus project, found herself leading a team tasked with creating weapons that could strike targets across interstellar distances instantly. The breakthrough came from studying the quantum entanglement principles that made faster-than-light communication possible. If information could be transmitted instantaneously across galactic distances, then theoretically, weapons effects could be transmitted the same way. Working around the clock in facilities buried deep within Luna's interior, Kim's team developed what they called quantum torpedoes, devices that existed in a state of quantum superposition until they detected specific target signatures. Once launched, the torpedoes would remain in quantum flux until they encountered their designated targets, at which point they would collapse into normal space-time and detonate with the force of a supernova. The weapons could be fired from Luna and would strike targets thousands of light-years away in the same instant, making them impossible to detect or intercept. More importantly, they could be programmed to target specific technological signatures, seeking out Council command ships and weapons platforms with perfect accuracy. As Earth frantically prepared for the coming assault, the Council fleet continued to gather strength. Species that had been conquered centuries ago found themselves contributing their most advanced vessels to the campaign against humanity. The Zaltans provided their engineering expertise, the Kythara contributed their exploration vessels converted for military use, and the Mordesh offered their entire warrior fleet. But the integration of so many different technologies and command structures created problems that the Council had never faced before. Each species had different tactical doctrines, different communication protocols, and different definitions of acceptable casualties. Welding them into a cohesive fighting force would require careful coordination and extensive planning. Overseer Theron, despite his previous defeat, was placed in command of the fleet's advance elements. His experience with human weapons made him valuable, even though his failure had cost him political standing within the Council hierarchy. He studied the tactical reports obsessively, trying to understand how humanity had achieved such devastating results with relatively few weapons. The analysis revealed disturbing patterns. Human weapons appeared to be designed specifically for asymmetric warfare, maximizing destructive potential while minimizing resource requirements. Rather than building massive fleets like the Council, humans had focused on creating individual weapons that could destroy entire formations of enemy ships. More concerning was the evidence that humanity had been preparing for interstellar warfare since their first detection of alien signals. Their entire approach suggested a species that viewed conflict as inevitable and had planned accordingly. This wasn't a desperate improvisation, it was the execution of a strategy that had been years in the making. As the Council fleet began its journey towards Sol System, reports started arriving from across their empire of increasing unrest among member species. The news of humanity's victory had spread despite efforts at censorship, inspiring independence movements that had been dormant for centuries. On Kithara Prime, the homeworld of the galaxy's premier explorers, riots broke out as citizens demanded information about human weapons technology. The Kithara had been among the first species to join the Council voluntarily, trading their freedom for protection against hostile forces. But if humans could defeat the Council militarily, perhaps independence was possible after all. The Zeltans, master engineers who had built most of the Council's infrastructure, began questioning why their technological innovations were used exclusively to benefit their conquerors. If they could construct weapons like humanity's gravitational generators, why had they never been allowed to defend themselves? Even among the Mordesh, the Council's primary military force, whispers of discontent began to spread. They had been told that their warrior culture was being used to maintain galactic peace, but humanity's resistance had demonstrated that the Council's definition of peace was simply another word for oppression. Grand Overseer Molphin watched these developments with growing alarm. The human victory hadn't just challenged the Council's military supremacy, it had undermined the psychological foundations of their empire. If member species began to believe that resistance was possible, the entire structure of galactic civilization would collapse. "Accelerate the fleet's departure," Malfin commanded. "Every day we delay gives humanity more time to prepare, and our own populations more time to question their loyalty." The Grand Fleet departed Council space in the largest military operation in galactic history, 7,000 ships carrying the combined might of 47 civilizations, toward a confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy. Their faster-than-light drives created gravitational distortions visible from hundreds of light years away, announcing to any species capable of detecting them that the Council was moving to war. On Earth, long-range sensors tracked the approaching armada with growing concern. Intelligence estimates suggested that the Council fleet would arrive within 6 weeks, giving humanity little time to complete their preparations. The Atlas project was ahead of schedule, but many of the weapon systems remained untested at full capacity. Director Webb stood on Luna's surface, looking up at the Earth hanging in the black sky above. Somewhere out there, the largest military force in galactic history was approaching with the single goal of ensuring humanity's complete destruction. But humanity had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and their own capacity for self-destruction. They would survive this, too. Status report, Webb requested from Dr. Vasquez. "Atlas is 87% complete," she replied. "The primary gravitational generators are online and tested. The quantum disruptor network is fully operational. The faster-than-light weapon system will be ready for deployment within 48 hours. Webb nodded, studying the tactical displays showing the approaching Council fleet. 7,000 ships represented more destructive power than had ever been concentrated in one place, but humanity had learned important lessons from their own history about the relationship between size and effectiveness. "Remember what happened to the dinosaurs," Webb said quietly. "It wasn't the biggest predator that survived the asteroid impact, it was the one that adapted fastest to changing conditions." The Council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since they first looked up at the stars, and they were ready to demonstrate why their species had conquered their own world through sheer determination and technological innovation. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and humanity intended to win it decisively enough to ensure that no one would ever threaten Earth again. As the weeks passed and the Council fleet drew closer to Sol System, Both sides prepared for a confrontation that would reshape the galaxy forever. But while the Council planned to overwhelm humanity through sheer numerical superiority, humans were preparing to demonstrate why they had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. The aliens had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had confused Earth's restraint for weakness, not recognizing that humans had learned to create weapons so terrible that they preferred not to use them. But when threatened with extinction, humanity would unleash forces that would make their previous victory look like a minor skirmish. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when someone pushed humanity past their breaking point. The Council's grand fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system like a plague of metallic locusts, their combined mass so great that their gravitational fields disrupted the orbits of distant comets. 7,000 ships stretched across space in a formation that spanned nearly 1 million kilometers, representing the combined military might of 47 civilizations and 3,000 years of galactic conquest. Grand Overseer Malthon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion Eternal, studying tactical displays that showed the complete absence of human resistance. Long-range sensors detected no defending fleets, no orbital fortifications, no signs of military preparation. Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel, apparently defenseless and waiting for conquest. Perhaps they've reconsidered their position, Admiral Keth suggested, still haunted by memories of his previous encounter with human weapons. A species intelligent enough to develop such advanced technology might be wise enough to recognize the futility of resistance. Malthon's expression remained skeptical. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity had spent the past month in frantic military preparation, converting their moon into some kind of fortress. But his sensors detected no energy signatures from Luna beyond normal industrial activity. Either the humans had given up, or they were hiding something. Begin standard siege protocols, Malthon commanded. Surround the system, establish overlapping fire patterns, and transmit surrender demands. If they resist, we'll reduce their planet to molten slag before moving on to their colonies. The Grand Fleet spread out through the solar system in a formation designed to ensure that no ship could escape and no location could avoid bombardment. The aliens had learned painful lessons from their previous defeat and had adapted their tactics accordingly. This time, they would attack from every angle simultaneously, overwhelming any defensive systems through sheer volume of fire. But deep within Luna's transformed interior, humanity was ready for them. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the alien deployment from her command center buried 2 kilometers beneath the moon's surface. The Atlas project had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections, converting Luna into a weapon so powerful that it could theoretically destroy entire star systems. The moon's interior had been completely restructured, its core replaced with gravitational generators that drew energy from quantum fluctuations in the vacuum itself. "All stations report ready," she announced to the Global Command Network. Project Atlas is fully operational and awaiting authorization. Director Webb, coordinating the defense from his bunker beneath Geneva, watched the alien formation with grim satisfaction. The Council had made exactly the mistake humanity had hoped for, spreading their forces throughout the solar system in a pattern that would maximize their vulnerability to Earth's exotic weapons. "Weapons free," Webb commanded. "Show them what happens when someone threatens our home." The first phase of humanity's counterattack began with the activation of the enhanced Damocles network. The gravitational generators that had destroyed the previous Council fleet had been upgraded with exotic matter cores that could manipulate space-time itself. Instead of creating simple gravitational anomalies, the new weapons could generate tears in the fabric of reality. Space itself began to unravel around the Council fleet as gravitational fields of impossible intensity appeared throughout their formation. But these weren't the localized distortions the aliens had faced before. The enhanced generators created cascading failures in space-time, each gravitational pulse triggering larger disruptions that spread through the quantum foam like wildfire. The effect was catastrophic. Entire squadrons of Council ships found themselves caught in gravitational whirlpools that stretched their hulls beyond the breaking point, before sucking them into miniature black holes. The exotic matter cores didn't just destroy matter, they consumed the very space the ships had occupied, leaving behind nothing but expanding voids that continued to grow until they collapsed under their own impossibility. Admiral Keth watched in horror as his forward elements simply vanished, swallowed by gravitational anomalies that violated every known law of physics. "All ships, emergency scatter pattern," he commanded, but the gravitational fields were appearing faster than his vessels could react. Within minutes, nearly 1,000 Council ships had been consumed by the enhanced Damocles network. But unlike the previous battle, the aliens had learned to expect gravitational weapons and had developed countermeasures. Their remaining vessels activated quantum stabilizers that created protective bubbles of normal spacetime around their hulls, shielding them from further gravitational attacks. Gravitational countermeasures are effective, Dr. Worth, Vasquez reported. Switching to secondary systems. The second phase began as Luna's quantum disruptor network came online. The Thanatos array had been expanded throughout the moon's structure, creating a weapons platform that could fire in every direction simultaneously. But these weren't the same quantum disruptors that had annihilated the previous fleet. Humanity had learned to weaponize the fundamental forces that held reality together. Colonel Reed coordinated the firing sequence from his control center, his screens showing targeting solutions for over 6,000 enemy vessels. The enhanced quantum disruptors didn't just tear apart atomic bonds, they temporarily disrupted the strong nuclear force that held protons and neutrons together. When the effect ended, matter would reassemble itself, but not necessarily in the same configuration it had possessed before. Thanatos array firing, Reed announced. The quantum beams were invisible and undetectable, striking the Council fleet at the speed of light with effects that redefined the concept of destruction. Ships hit by the disruptors experienced what could only be described as existential dissolution. Their matter didn't explode or vaporize. It simply forgot how to exist in an organized fashion. Crews found themselves watching in bewilderment as their vessels transformed into clouds of randomly organized atoms. Metal became gas, gas became plasma. Plasma became exotic matter states that had no names in any language. The effect lasted only seconds, but when reality reasserted itself, the ships had been transformed into expanding clouds of cosmic dust. Over 1,500 Council vessels ceased to exist in the span of 30 seconds, but the aliens had anticipated exotic weapons and had developed new defensive technologies specifically for this engagement. Emergency force fields flickered to life around the surviving ships, creating quantum isolation barriers that prevented the disruptor beams from affecting their internal structure. They're adapting to our weapons, Reed reported. Quantum countermeasures are reducing effectiveness by 70%. But humanity had prepared for this possibility. The third phase of their defense was based on technology so advanced that it barely qualified as weaponry at all. Dr. Sarah Kim activated the faster-than-light weapons network from her command center deep within Luna's core. The quantum torpedoes existed in a state of superposition that allowed them to travel instantly across any distance, making them impossible to intercept or defend against. But more importantly, they had been programmed to target the quantum signatures of consciousness itself. Erebus network firing, Kim announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of destruction she was about to unleash. The quantum torpedoes materialized inside Council ships without passing through the intervening space, bypassing shields and armor through the simple expedient of never having existed in the same reality as their targets. When they detonated, they released waves of quantum entanglement that interfered with the electrical activity of neural tissue. Across the Council fleet, alien crews experienced simultaneous neurological collapse as their consciousness became entangled with quantum fields that operated outside normal spacetime. The effect was instant and absolute. Beings who had evolved on dozens of different worlds under vastly different conditions all shared the same basic requirement for organized neural activity to maintain consciousness. The quantum weapons attacked that fundamental requirement directly, creating interference patterns that prevented thoughts from forming coherent structures. Within seconds, the crews of nearly 3,000 Council ships had been reduced to biological machinery with no controlling intelligence, their vessels drifting helplessly through space like ghost ships crewed by living corpses. Grand Overseer Malfin watched his fleet disintegrate around him with growing desperation. In less than an hour, humanity had destroyed or disabled over half of the largest military force in galactic history, using weapons that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. These weren't just advanced versions of familiar technology, they were entirely new categories of warfare that treated the universe itself as ammunition. All remaining ships converge on Earth, Malfin commanded. If we can't defeat their weapons, we'll overwhelm them through concentration of force. The surviving Council vessels, numbering roughly 2,500 ships, abandoned their formation and rushed toward Earth in a desperate attempt to bring their own weapons to bear before humanity could destroy them all. It was a tactically sound decision that played directly into humanity's carefully laid trap. Wow. As the alien fleet approached Earth, they passed through the orbital space where humanity's conventional defenses had been positioned for decades. The platforms and satellites appeared to be standard defensive installations, barely worthy of attention from ships that had survived humanity's exotic weapons. But appearances were deceiving. Each orbital platform contained quantum entanglement transmitters linked directly to Luna's weapons network. As the Council ships passed through Earth's defensive perimeter, they unknowingly exposed themselves to targeting systems that could track them across interstellar distances. Enemy fleet entering terminal approach, Admiral Chen Zhao reported from his flagship. All orbital platforms report target lock. The fourth phase of humanity's defense was the simplest and most devastating. Rather than attacking the enemy ships directly, they attacked the space the ships occupied. Luna's gravitational generators, operating at maximum power, began creating massive distortions in Earth's local space-time, turning the planet's gravitational field into a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Earth itself became a gravity well so intense that approaching ships found their faster-than-light drives failing as the fabric of space-time became too distorted to sustain exotic physics. The Council vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves trapped in a gravitational maze that channeled them towards specific points in space. At each convergence point, humanity had positioned what they called quantum mines, devices that existed in superposition until enemy ships approached close enough to trigger their collapse into normal reality. When the mines materialized, they released the total energy output of a star compressed into a space the size of a basketball. The resulting explosions were visible from neighboring star systems, brief suns that bloomed and died in seconds while consuming everything within millions of kilometers. Council ships that had survived gravitational distortions, quantum disruptors, and consciousness attacks found themselves vaporized by forces that turned matter into pure energy with perfect efficiency. But even as his fleet died around him, Malthan refused to admit defeat. The Dominion Eternal was equipped with the most advanced defensive systems the Council could provide, and its quantum isolation barriers had protected it from humanity's exotic attacks. If he could reach Earth's surface, he could still complete his mission of conquest. All power to forward shields, Malthan commanded as his flagship plowed through the expanding clouds of vaporized matter that had once been his fleet. Prepare for orbital bombardment. If we can't conquer this world, we'll ensure that no one can. The Dominion Eternal broke through Earth's defensive perimeter with its weapons charged and ready to reduce the planet's surface to radioactive slag. But as the massive ship entered low orbit, it encountered humanity's final defensive measure. Project Gaia had been developed in absolute secrecy during the weeks leading up to the Council's arrival. Unlike the exotic weapons that manipulated space-time and quantum mechanics, Gaia was based on a simple principle that any human child could understand. If someone threatens your family, you stop them by any means necessary. Earth's entire industrial capacity had been secretly converted to produce a single type of weapon. Devices so simple that they barely qualified as technology at all. Kinetic penetrators, lumps of dense metal accelerated to significant fractions of the speed of light, were deployed in clouds around Earth's orbital space. When the Dominion Eternal entered the defense zone, it encountered not exotic physics or quantum manipulations, but millions of projectiles moving at velocities that turned mass into pure destruction. The ship's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and exotic attacks, were overwhelmed by simple kinetic energy delivered in quantities that exceeded the total energy output of small stars. Malthan had just enough time to realize that humanity had used the galaxy's most advanced civilization as target practice for weapons that would have been familiar to their Stone Age ancestors, before his flagship disintegrated under an assault that reduced it to its component atoms in less than a second. The silence that followed the destruction of the Grand Fleet was absolute. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Council armada had been completely annihilated, every ship destroyed or disabled, every crew either dead or reduced to biological machinery. Humanity had not merely defeated the galaxy's dominant power, they had demonstrated that resistance was not only possible but devastatingly effective. In the aftermath of the battle, Director Webb stood in Luna's command center, surveying the wreckage of 7,000 ships scattered across the solar system. The victory was complete, but he knew it was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this defeat, and other alien civilizations would be watching to see how Earth dealt with the power vacuum they had just created. Status report, Webb requested. All enemy vessels neutralized, General Voss reported. 0 survivors detected. Our own casualties are negligible, limited to equipment failures during weapons testing. The disparity was staggering. Humanity had faced the combined military might of 47 civilizations and emerged without losing a single life, while their enemies had suffered complete annihilation. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of warfare, achieved through weapons that redefined the very concept of military technology. But Webb understood that their victory would have consequences far beyond the destruction of a single fleet. Across the galaxy, member species of the Council would be receiving news of humanity's triumph and beginning to question their own subjugation. The psychological impact would be even more devastating than the military defeat. Begin Phase 5, Webb commanded. It's time to teach the galaxy what humanity really stands for. The final phase of humanity's response to the Council's aggression wasn't military at all. It was a message broadcast across the entire galaxy using faster-than-light communication technology, reverse-engineered from captured alien equipment. The transmission was simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. "This is Director Webb of the United Earth Government," the message began, his voice carrying to every civilization capable of receiving faster-than-light communications. "Today, the Galactic Council sent 7,000 ships to destroy humanity because we refused to accept slavery disguised as membership. Those ships no longer exist." The broadcast continued with detailed recordings of the battle, showing exactly how humanity's weapons had annihilated the galaxy's most powerful fleet. But more importantly, it explained why humanity had fought and what they intended to do next. "We came to the stars seeking friendship and found only tyrants," Webb continued. "But humanity has a long history of dealing with tyrants. We offer every species currently enslaved by the Council a simple choice. Throw off your chains and join us in building a galaxy based on freedom and cooperation. Or continue to serve masters who see you as nothing more than resources to be exploited." The message was accompanied by complete technical specifications for humanity's exotic weapons, freely shared with any civilization brave enough to use them. Earth was offering the tools of liberation to anyone willing to fight for their freedom, backed by the promise of human military support for any species that chose independence over continued subjugation. Across Council space, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Species that had accepted their subordinate status for centuries began demanding answers from their Council overseers. Populations that had never questioned their servitude started organizing resistance movements. Entire star systems began declaring independence, confident that humanity's weapons could protect them from Council retaliation. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had not merely won a battle, they had started a revolution that would topple the greatest empire in galactic history and replace it with something unprecedented. A confederation of free species working together by choice rather than compulsion. But in doing so, they had also painted a target on Earth that would attract every hostile force in the galaxy. Other alien empires, watching the Council's defeat, would see humanity as either a threat to be eliminated or a prize to be claimed. The war for Earth's independence was over, but the war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. As Webb finished his broadcast and began planning humanity's next moves, he reflected on Ambassador Chen's sacrifice and the chain of events it had set in motion. Her death had been the catalyst for the greatest military victory in human history, but more importantly, it had revealed humanity's true purpose among the stars. They hadn't come to the galaxy to conquer or exploit, but to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between slavery and extinction. That principle would guide humanity's actions in the conflicts to come, and it would reshape the galaxy in ways that no alien civilization could anticipate. The age of the Council was ending, and the age of human leadership was about to begin. 6 months after the annihilation of the Grand Fleet, the galaxy was in chaos. The news of humanity's victory had spread faster than the Council's ability to suppress it, igniting independence movements across 47 star systems. Species that had accepted subjugation for millennia suddenly found themselves in possession of weapon blueprints that could level the playing field against their former masters. The first world to declare independence was Kythara Prime, homeworld of the galaxy's premier explorers. The Kythara had always chafed under Council restrictions that limited their expansion into uncharted space, and humanity's technical specifications gave them the tools they needed to break free. Within weeks, they had constructed gravitational weapons based on human designs and used them to destroy the Council garrison that had occupied their system for 800 years. On the mining worlds of the Outer Rim, slave populations that had been brutalized for generations rose up against their overseers. Human quantum disruptor technology, simplified for mass production, allowed even primitive civilizations to build weapons that could penetrate Council armor and shields. The revolution spread like wildfire, jumping from system to system as newly freed populations shared weapons and tactics with their neighbors. But the collapse of Council authority created as many problems as it solved. Without the Iron Hand that had maintained order for 3 millennia, ancient grudges and territorial disputes erupted into open warfare. Species that had been forced to coexist under Council rule suddenly found themselves free to settle old scores with devastating new weapons. Director Webb watched these developments from his expanded command center on Luna, now the de facto capital of an informal alliance that spanned dozens of star systems. The facility had grown dramatically since the battle, transformed from a military installation into a diplomatic hub where representatives from across the galaxy came to seek humanity's guidance and support. The Mordesh have declared war on the Zelthans, Ambassador Sarah Park reported during the morning briefing. Park had been promoted to head of the newly created Galactic Affairs Division after Ambassador Chen's death, inheriting the complex task of managing relationships with dozens of alien civilizations simultaneously. They're claiming that centuries of forced cooperation don't eliminate their historical territorial disputes. Webb studied the tactical display showing the expanding zones of conflict across former Council space. The Mordesh warrior culture had made them natural soldiers for the Council's expansion campaigns, but Freedom had unleashed their aggressive instincts against former allies. Their fleets, now equipped with human weapons, were systematically attacking Zeltan engineering installations throughout their shared border regions. "What's the casualty estimate?" Webb asked. 3 billion dead in the first week of fighting, Park replied grimly. Both sides are using quantum disruptors without restraint. Entire planets are being reduced to cosmic dust. The numbers were staggering. In 6 months of liberation warfare, more sapient beings had died than in the previous 1,000 years of Council oppression. Humanity's gift of freedom had come with a terrible price, and many species were beginning to question whether independence was worth the cost. General Voss entered the briefing room with her own set of disturbing reports. Intelligence suggests that at least 12 species are actively working to reconstitute the Council under new leadership. They're arguing that galactic civilization requires central authority, even if it means accepting limited autonomy. The irony was bitter. Some species preferred the certainty of oppression to the chaos of freedom, especially when that freedom came with weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. They had lived under the Council's boot for so long that they couldn't imagine any other form of organization. "What about the core Council worlds?" Webb inquired. "Still under siege," Voss replied. "The surviving Council leadership has retreated to their most heavily defended systems and is attempting to organize a counterattack. They've reached out to several extragalactic powers, offering territorial concessions in exchange for military support." That was the development that worried Webb.